Okay, so we have a couple of questions that come from the Chinese audience. The first one is to please clarify what is karma that is definite to be or certain to be experienced, and what is uncertain karma. What is the difference between these two? So when we use these terms as certain and uncertain karma, certain karma refers to karma whose maturational result is certain to be experienced if no adverse conditions interfere. So, karma which is uncertain refers to karma whose maturational result is not definite or is not certain that we will experience as long as those adverse conditions do not interfere. So in the first case of maturational result that is certain to be experienced, if we take killing, for example, if you have the intention to kill and then you complete this activity of killing exactly according to your wishes, you have killing that is done and accumulated, and that is the maturational result of that is something that we will certainly come to experience unless we are able to purify, confess and totally purify this negativity through the four opponent powers before the result comes into maturation. To give you an example of karma that is not certain to be experienced, again, if we can take a killing, for example, in the case that you are lacking the motivation, right? So, for example, you don't want to kill, but someone makes you kill somebody else. Or in case that you have the motivation yourself, but actually you never carry out the activity, this is karma that is not certain to be experienced. Okay, so the second question is this. When we were discussing the human suffering, we mentioned the fault of uncertainty. And the example that was given during the teachings was that in this life, someone might be your relative, you have a good connection, and then next life, they come as an enemy. And the question is, why should this happen? This seems to contradict the essence of the law of cause and effect. If, let's say, we are within a family in this life and we have really loving connection and loving relationship, we are creating the causes to have continue to have good relationships. So why would we come back in the next life as enemies? Doesn't that contradict the law of cause and effect? And Geshe is saying, actually, no, we can both account for this uncertainty and without contradicting the law of cause and effect. The reason for that is that each one of us has countless rebirths. So if we were to try to find the beginning of our rebirths of our lives, we would have to say it is countless. Just as this is true for myself, it is also true for my friends, my relatives. Everybody has had countless lifetimes. And that means that we have accumulated countless types of good and bad karma within our during those lifetimes. And we do carry a lot of karma that has not been purified. And definitely we have the capacity to act as enemies. We have many millions of karmic seeds to act as enemies, just as we have as many karmic seeds to act as friends and relatives and be really supportive to each other. So because of that, there is actually no certainty. In this life, we could be friends, but that friendship and that closeness that we have in this life is no guarantee that it will continue in our next life. It is very possible that in our next life we will be enemies, and it does not contradict the law of cause and effect because we have the potential to be enemies and it has not been purified. Okay, so let's go back into our text. We are looking at the training the mind in the stages of the path shared with a person of medium capacity. And in that, we have two main outlines: generating the mind, intent for liberation, and ascertaining the nature of the path that leads to liberation. For the second one, generating the mind that is intent on liberation, we contemplate the suffering in samsara, and we do this in two ways. First of all, we do the general suffering, and then we do specific suffering in samsara. In terms of the general suffering, we contemplate 6 types of suffering. The first one, that there is uncertainty. The second one, that there is no satisfaction. The third one is that we have to cast our bodies again, cast off the bodies again and again. The fourth one, that we have to repeatedly take rebirth. And the fifth one is that we have to descend from a high place to a low place. And the sixth one is that we have no companions. Okay, so that is the general suffering in samsara, and then we go into the specific suffering in samsara. Specific suffering in samsara, we want to look at suffering at the lower migrations and the higher migrations. In the lower migrations, we're not going to repeat the material because this is something already taught in the path that is shared with the individual of the small scope. Then we start looking at the suffering of the higher migrations, and that will include the suffering of the humans, demigods, and gods. We have looked at the suffering of humans, and we have identified 7 types of suffering: birth, aging, sickness, death, encountering the unpleasant, not finding the pleasant, not getting what we want. So these 7. And now we will continue with the suffering of the demigods. Right, so we say that the new material would be about demigods, but we need to go and catch up on the easy path on the section that talks about the suffering of humans. So if you go on page 17, halfway down that page, it says, as for the second one, reflecting on specific sufferings, once meditating on the Guru Yudam on the top of your head, contemplate as follows. As long as the appropriated aggregates came into existence, they cannot transcend the nature of suffering. So we use the term here, appropriated aggregates, because these are aggregates that have been appropriated or taken due to the power of karma and afflictions. So once you hear that those aggregates have been established through afflictions and karma, you can understand that they do not transcend the nature of suffering. They cannot be anything other than suffering. So what need is there to speak about the 3 unfortunate rebirths? You have already taken appropriated aggregates through the force of karma and afflictions, and if these type of aggregates are aggregates of the lower rebirths, it's obvious there will be a lot of suffering, as we have explained in the context of the individual of the small scope. Then it says, even depending upon human appropriated aggregates, one experiences the suffering of hunger and thirst, of acquiring and losing wealth, of being separated from dear ones, of having to meet hated enemies, of not finding what one wished for, although one looks for it, of undesired things befalling on oneself, of birth, old age, sick, illness, death, and so forth. So this describes the different types of human suffering. We explained human suffering last week, but these are the actual words according to the easy path. Okay, so we continue with the next sentence. So it says, depending on demigods' appropriated aggregates, one experiences the suffering of a distressed mind, envious of the prosperity of the gods, and as a result, sufferings affecting the body. So the obviously, you know, the demigods have different types of suffering, but the main suffering that they experience is suffering that comes out of jealousy. The demigods have 4 cities, and they live in 4 cities, and those cities are in 4 different tiers along Mount Meru. So the first one is called the beautiful, the second one is called the one with radiant light, the third one is called the beautiful abode, and the fourth one is called the stable or unmoving city. In the demigods have their own leaders or kings, rulers, and so forth, and they have quite a lot of wealth. But whatever they have does not compare with the wealth and the resources of the gods, and in particular the ruler of gods, Indra. So out of their jealousy, they are always compelled to start wars and engage in battles, trying to obtain what the gods have, but being inferior in their power, they experience quite a lot of suffering through these activities. So we're talking here about the suffering of demigods. We say the main suffering that they experience is the suffering of jealousy, and then all the suffering that results from engaging in all this war and fight with the gods. Because they have inferior power, in most cases, they lose, they are defeated in these wars. And what happens is that, let's say the ones who fight are in the battlefield, but the remaining of the population is back home in their cities, and there they have a lake that reflects, when they look in this lake, they can see the situation as it is unfolding. So they can see there the defeat of their armies, and they can see their relatives being killed and suffering as they die. So this is described to be one of the biggest sufferings of the demigods. Okay, so we now move into the sufferings of the gods. We have gods of the desire realm, of the form realm, and the formless realm. So first of all, let's look at the gods of the desire realm. We have 6 different types or classes of god in the desire realm. And it is said that the biggest suffering that they experience is the suffering that comes with death and transference. So those gods, they actually have clairvoyance. So when the death approaches, they can see that death is coming, and they can also see where they're going to be reborn. Now, previous to their time of death, they spend their very long lives in absolute enjoyment and luxury. Male and female gods, they enjoy each other's company. They just enjoy every day. And then suddenly, this karma that was keeping them in that god realm that has projected them there, that karma is exhausted. So now they would have to leave from that god realm. And with their clairvoyance, they can see that the end is coming. Actually, they suffer tremendously because there are 5 signs of death that they experience. The first of those signs of death is that the incredible beauty and the radiance of their complexion declines. When they are healthy, they have this golden glow, but suddenly they lose that golden glow and they become, sort of like pale, the equivalent of humans who are pale. The second sign is that they cannot sit, they don't want to sit on their thrones. So, with a human, when you have a human that is mentally disturbed, that cannot actually sit still in a chair, they kind of like they sit for a second and then they get up again and then they sit down, like a very nervous person. So they develop this sort of nervousness, and they cannot sit on their thrones. The third sign is that the flower garlands that they wear around the necks begin to get old and wilt. Now, in the god realm, they wear flower garlands, and kind of like magically every day the wind blows, and the wind brings with it a new, completely fresh set of flowers on them. But when they approach the time of death, the wind does not bring any fresh flowers. So the flowers they have on their body, they become old and they wither and they dry up. The next sign is that their clothes suddenly become smelly and dirty. And the 5th sign is that the body begins to sweat. So compared to their previous completely luxurious and very enjoyable life, suddenly they go through these signs of death, which is totally unbearable and shocking for them. It is said that these signs of death last for 7 days in that God realm. However, in the first level of the gods, 1 day equals 50 human years. So 7 days there is going to be 350 human years. In the next level, which is the gods of 33, 1 day in that level equals 100 human years. In the next level, which is the gods free, the realm free of conflict, 1 day lasts for 200 human years. And then you go like this through the 6 types of gods of the desire realm, and you can see how, for what incredible length of time they have to experience that suffering of knowing the death is coming, death and transference. So in terms of suffering, when we describe the suffering of the 6 types of migrations, we say that in terms of the physical suffering, it is the hell beings who have the most intense suffering. But in terms of the mental suffering, it is those gods of the desire realm who suffer the most. Okay, so we still describe those signs of death that those gods of the desire realm will experience. Another sign is that usually their clothes and the jewelry they have, when they move around, they make this very pleasant noise. But all of a sudden, as they approach death, the noise that their jewelry makes is a very unpleasant, like clunky noise. And the whole body loses its radiance, and their mind becomes extremely upset. The body becomes completely upset, and also they cannot, usually they keep their eyes, they have very big eyes that they are open and very beautiful, but suddenly it's as if they want to close their eyes. They don't want to keep their eyes open. And through their clairvoyance, they know that they're coming at the end of this very pleasurable existence, and they are heading for the hells because they have exhausted so much karma. So they find that unbearable. As we say, those signs of death last for 7 days. And Geshe gave us a list of how much those 7 days, so a week in the God realm, because we have 6 different levels, how long it is in terms of human years. So for the first level, it's 350 years. For the second, which is the gods of 33, so now we're talking about the whole 7 days, it is 700 human years. For the free of conflict, it is 1,000 human years. For Tushita, it is 2,800 years. For the next one, Truka, it is 5,600 years. And the last one is 10,200 years. So this is for how long that suffering is experienced. Then it is said that if, for example, we have a male god who is dying, when as he is approaching the time of his death, his previous female companions, his lovers and so forth, suddenly they don't want to be with him anymore. They all avoid him, and they keep their distance. And he can see that his companions, his female companions, are now seeking the company and the pleasure of other male gods. So he feels so disappointed, so abandoned by his previous female companions, and at the same time he feels so angry and jealous for the other male gods who will now experience, enjoy their company. If it is the case of a female goddess who is dying, again, she finds that her previous lovers abandon her. They don't want to be with her at all. And she sees them walking away with other goddesses. So again, she generates a lot of anger and hatred and jealousy towards those other females. And gods and goddesses, when they die, they call their other god friends, not lovers, but god friends. And they say, please, let's meet for one last time, because it's going to be a very long time that we will not meet again. Please, let's come and meet. However, those friends they don't want to meet with them. They want to keep their distance. And what they do is they put a garland of flowers at the end of a very long stick, and they kind of like push that garland in their direction. And they say, we should make prayers so that you will be reborn as a human again, and then you must try very hard when you're a human to accumulate merit to be reborn again as a god. So this is their farewell, and it is quite painful. Now, in terms of the gods of the desire realm, these gods are called the ones who know three things. They know they're given this name because actually they have recognition of where they are born, and they know what was their previous rebirth, and they know what sort of karma has brought them there. So they're aware of those three things, and this is why they're called having the knowledge of three things. However, again, within the realm of desire realm gods, not all the gods have similar status. So you have some gods that are much more powerful, much more influential, they have much more wealth, and so forth. And that means that there are other gods who have less possessions, they don't have so much power, they don't have so much influence. So there are these differences, and the gods who have all the power and the wealth, they often intimidate those who are weaker. They steal their wealth, even they might expel them from where they live, and so forth. So it is not a place that is an easy place to live. And in addition to that, as we say, the demigods always are waging wars, and the gods have to fight with the demigods. And when they fight with those demigods, in the battles, different limbs are cut off, they are injured, their heads are severed, and so on and so forth. So within the 6 types of gods of the desire realm, there is quite a lot of suffering if you are born there. So as you can see here with the gods of the desire realm, we describe those beings are beings who have experienced incredible pleasure and luxury due to the enjoyment and the wealth they have, and they have very long lives compared to the humans. However, they spend their lives in a very childish way. They're like children who are totally engrossed in that play, and although they have very long lives, because they are so preoccupied and they're enjoying so much one enjoyment after the other, they don't realize how quickly the time goes. So it seems like it goes like a flash, and then suddenly they have those signs of death, and from that point they know that they're going to be reborn in the hells, and they experience this incredible suffering. So there is this Geshe who said, if we, according to the teachings of the Buddha, and if we look at all those gods in the different realms, it says everyone from the peak of existence downwards seems to be at the edge of an abyss, ready to fall down into the hells. So here the peak of existence is the highest place you can reach within cyclic existence, within samsara. So it says everyone basically all the way up to the tip of samsara is at the edge of the cliff, ready to fall. And he said, from their side, those gods, they think that they have a great life. They are experiencing great pleasure. But before they know it, this life is finished, right? And he says, I know, I have seen this, the pleasures they experience. It is great bliss, but actually this bliss is quite deceiving because it does not allow you to practice Dharma. So if you were to ask me which one I would choose, would I choose this life of a god with great pleasure, or would I choose to go for refuge and recite Om Mani Padme Hum? My choice is to go for refuge and recite Om Mani Padme Hum. So if we're going to our text, the easy path, the section that describes the suffering of demigods and gods of the desire realm is the last paragraph of page 17. Depending on semi-gods appropriated aggregates, one experiences the suffering of a distressed mind, envious of the prosperity of the gods, and as a result, sufferings affecting the body. So we said that once you are born in this life, in this existence of a demigod, the biggest suffering you will have is that your mind will be suffering because you have so much jealousy for the gods that have more than you, and that jealousy is driving them to engage in all these wars, and obviously they lose the wars, and they are wounded, their bodies are cut off and so forth. So they have a lot of physical suffering as a result of that. Okay, then it continues. Depending on the desire realm gods, appropriated aggregates, so gods of the desire realm, one experiences the suffering of broken limbs, wounds, and finally dying when fighting the semi-gods. So we say they have to go into battles with the semi-gods, and in those battles, they also suffer physically. They are wounded physically. And then of being hit by the signs of death, although one does not wish for. So they don't wish to die, but they receive those signs, that the 5 signs that are eminent signs of their death. And knowing that one has to undergo the suffering of the unfortunate rebirths after being separated from the riches of gods. So they suffer in this way. All right, so far we have looked at the suffering of we're looking at the suffering of the higher rebirths. We have looked at the suffering of humans, demigods, and then we started with the category of gods. Usually we use the term gods and we think that it is just one group, one category, but actually when we analyze, we see that there are many different types of gods. First of all, we have gods of the desire realm, and we say that there are 6 types of gods there, and then we have gods of the form realm and gods of the formless realm. So for the gods of the form realm, we have a total of 17 types because we have the 4 levels of the 4 absorptions, they're called, and these are places, these are god realms, right? So in the first absorption, the first level, we have 3 types. In the second one, we have again 3 types. In the third one, we have 3 types. And in the fourth one, we have 8 types of gods. So in this way, we have 17 types of gods in the form realm. When we come into the formless realm, we have 4 levels, so 4 absorptions. It is limitless light, limitless mind, nothingness, and peak of existence. Right, so we are looking now at the suffering of the gods of the form and the formless realm. So in the form and the formless realm, obviously they do not have the types of suffering of the gods of the desire realm, and obviously they don't have the suffering of humans. However, they have not yet abandoned the seed of suffering. What they have done is they have only temporarily suppressed manifest suffering. So what happens is that they still have to experience the suffering of death and transference, and also they have to experience the suffering of not being in control, meaning they cannot remain in that abode, in that existence, according to their wish. When the time comes, they will have to move on, die, and take a lower rebirth. So the gods in the form realm have extremely long lives. When they are born there, they enter this concentration, and this concentration or absorption lasts for a very long time. But when the length of that concentration finishes, because it has a certain lifespan, right? So when that finishes, then against their will, they will have to die and then take another rebirth, which is going to be a rebirth in a state that is lower than the form realm god. So again, they have to experience that suffering. As long as they remain in that life, which is a very long life, during that concentration and so forth, they do not experience the suffering of the humans or the suffering of the desire realm gods. but they still have to experience the suffering of death and transference and the suffering of not having control or stability to remain on that place. Okay, so we are talking here about those gods in the form and the formless realm. So they have this attitude where they see that the feeling and the discrimination of the desire realm, they see it as being fault. They see them as being gross types of feelings and gross types of discrimination, and therefore they try to overcome them. And they do this by entering these very fine concentrations, equipoise that last for a very long time. Now, when they have this idea that the gross feeling and the gross discrimination of the desire realm is a fault, this thing on its own is not a wrong view. And when they enter those long equipoise, they do not generate wrong views during those long equipoise. However, when they move from the form realm to the formless realm, they have this feeling that they have obtained liberation. So they spend this time thinking that they have reached, these very refined concentrations and absorptions, that is the state of liberation. Now, when the karma that projects them in that type of existence is exhausted, at the very end of their life, they manifest again gross states of mind. So they manifest the type of mind of the desire realm. And by generating that type of mind, they realize that what they had before was not the state of liberation. So at the point of their death, they develop that thought that says, oh, after all, there is no liberation. The state of liberation does not exist. And that thought is a wrong view. So they pass away at death with wrong view. And that makes them take rebirth in the hells. Okay, so this is what is happening in this realm. Whilst they're in the concentration, very long absorptions, they don't have wrong views, but at the time of their death, they generate the wrong view that liberation does not exist, and that becomes the cause for them to fall in the lower migrations. Although they do not experience the gross type of suffering of the humans or of the gods of the desire realm and so forth, still they experience the suffering of not having control over how long or where they remain in terms of their abode. So this is how we describe the suffering of the fortunate migrations. So if we look at our text at the top of page 18, even from the appropriated aggregates of the two upper realms, the form and formless realms, since one has no control over one's abiding, there is the suffering of falling in the three lower realms due to the exhaustion of the propelling previous good karma. So in those higher realms, the form and the formless realm, the suffering that one has is that one has no control over abiding. Means, although they like where they are, it is not up to them. They do not have the control to remain there for a longer period of time. Once they remain there with very long lives, it is as if they are asleep. It is as if they are asleep for an eon, for hundreds and thousands of years. And then when that karma that propels them there is exhausted, they still have to experience death and transference. Once they're there, they do not experience the suffering of suffering. So they do not experience things such as the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, death, all this suffering of, someone being more powerful than them being less powerful, and so forth. So all this suffering that we observe in humans or in gods of the desire realm does not apply to them. But they spend this extremely long existence as if they were asleep in a comatose, almost like comatose situation, right? And they have no control over how long they can stay there, and at the end they will have to move. Okay, so up to here we have finished this section that is talking about the suffering of the specific suffering right? Because we say we want to contemplate the suffering in samsara. First of all, we do contemplate the suffering in general, and then we talk about specific suffering. And when we have this section of specific suffering, we are looking at the suffering of the humans, of the demigods and the gods. And within the gods, we're looking at the suffering of gods of the desire realm, the form, and the formless realm. Obviously, for the gods of the formless realm, as you can see here, they do not experience suffering as we commonly refer to the term, right? When we, what we usually describe as suffering does not really apply to those gods of the formless realm. Nevertheless, they all have their specific types of suffering. So Geshe was saying that ideally here, we should also mention again the suffering of those of the lower migrations. But because we have covered this subject in the context of the path that is shared with the individual of the small scope, we're not going to do it again. However, Geshe is suggesting to the students to look at other texts such as Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Read that section of the suffering, specific suffering. Read the suffering of the lower migrations and the higher migrations. They're very clear descriptions. So now Geshe would like to consolidate or talk about this whole thing of suffering in samsara in a brief way. Okay, so when we look at sentient beings, in terms of migrations, we have 6 types of migrations. In terms of realms, we have 3 types of realms. And in terms of birthplaces, we have 4 different birthplaces. So if you're going to be reborn in samsara, you're either going to be reborn from a womb, or you're going to be reborn from heat, or from an egg, or you're going to be born miraculously. Right, so these classifications that we give here describe different ways of being reborn in samsara and different birthplaces. So you can migrate or you can move in any of the 6 types of existence, of rebirth. You will be in any of the 3 realms, and you will be reborn in any of those 4 types of birth. Okay. Wherever you are born within samsara, you will be born with appropriated aggregates. And in order to generate the wish for liberation, really you must come to understand the nature of those appropriated aggregates. You have to come to see that they are full of mistakes, and that the nature of those aggregates is the nature of suffering. Even the term that we use, the term appropriated aggregates, has a specific meaning, because it actually shows you how you have taken those aggregates. We establish this body under the power of afflictions. So that which is established through the power of afflictions is called appropriated aggregates. And it's a case of giving the name of the cause, which is affliction, to the result, which is the body, right? So it is a body appropriated through affliction. So appropriated aggregates. Also, when we look at this term, appropriated aggregates, it can be interpreted as giving the name of the result to the cause, okay? Because once you have established this type of body, this body will generate afflictions in the future, all right? So it's not just the name of the cause to the result, but it's also the name of the result to the cause. You will generate afflictions again in the future. So if we look at the state of these aggregates that we have, of this body that we have, not only has it originated from afflictions, it has been established through afflictions, but once it is established, it will generate more afflictions in the future. It becomes the place or the basis for generating future afflictions. So this is the appropriated aggregates that we have. This is the meaning of appropriated aggregates. So if we were to explain how we establish the appropriated aggregates of this life, we have to look at the aggregates of the past life. So when we came to the end of our previous life at the time of death, then we activated craving and taking, or craving and grasping. So you know this presentation of the 12 links, the 8th and the 9th is craving and grasping. So at the time of death, we generated this craving. Craving is a type of attachment. So we have craving for the maturational body of the next life. So we have that craving. The craving intensifies and becomes grasping, and that craving and grasping of that became manifest at the end of the previous life establish the next body, because it activates karma, and through that karma we establish these life's aggregates. So now we establish these life's aggregates, and when we come to the end of this life, at the end of this life, again, we will generate craving and grasping. Craving and grasping are afflictions, aren't they? They will activate karma again, and that will establish the appropriated aggregates, or the maturational aggregates of our next life. So this is what it happens. It's a cycle. You go from affliction to appropriated aggregates, from the appropriated aggregates to affliction, affliction aggregates, aggregates affliction, affliction aggregates, and so forth. So there is a continuity that goes on with that. And we have been doing this since beginningless time. We have been taking or establishing a body, which is a body of suffering, and that body is established through afflictions, right? So unless we stop that stream, that continuity of establishing a body through afflictions, we will have to remain experience suffering within samsara. And actually, this is the meaning of samsara. Samsara means going around in a circle, and we're going around in a circle because we go from affliction to a body. At the end of the body, again, affliction, body, affliction, body. So this is the rotation that we do. So, you know, we use this term samsara, right? And some people say that samsara is a place, it's a location, right? But this is not the correct meaning of samsara. Samsara has this sense of recycling, right? Going around in a circle. And it refers to the fact that we are conceived in a new life again and again through the power of karma and afflictions. That's the meaning of samsara. So if we look at the contaminated feelings that we experience, those can be contaminated feelings of happiness, contaminated feelings of suffering, or contaminated neutral feelings. However, they're all contaminated. It is not just those. So we look at those contaminated feelings and the mental factors that are concordant with them. And these are actually the karmic composition. And we look at all the objects, all the powers, all the senses that experience those feelings. And we say that all of them have the power or the capacity to generate suffering. So this is why the Buddha has said that all contaminated entities are in the nature of suffering. So, you know, in the four seals of Buddhism, we say that all compounded phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering, and all phenomena are, then we talk about empty, and all phenomena are selfless. So this is what we mean. When something is contaminated, it will only be in the nature of suffering. And if we look at the objects, if we look at the senses, if we look at the feelings that we have when we interact with those objects, everything from beginning to end is contaminated. Therefore, it's in the nature of suffering. As the Buddha has said, when you are in samsara, it is as if you're sitting at the tip of a needle. So how could you possibly be comfortable and happy? Okay, so we say that since beginningless time, we have been wandering within cyclic existence. And if we don't do anything to change this situation in the future as well, for a very long time, we just continue wandering within samsara. So we say that we do this wandering, going around in samsara, because we are bound to aggregates due to karma and afflictions. So karma and afflictions is the thing that binds us to a particular type of body, any type of body amongst the 6 types of migrating beings. So we have to identify what is it that binds us, what is that restricts us, almost like a rope that binds us into a physical body. The thing that binds us is karma and afflictions. And the main things among these two is the afflictions. So until we completely abandon those afflictions, we have no hope of undoing the thing that binds us into samsara. Once we abandon those afflictions, we break the bond with samsara. And then we say that we are free, we are liberated. And this is what liberation from samsara, escaping samsara, is about. All right, so we are talking here about the general and specific suffering that is experienced in any of the 6 types of migrating beings. And once you are born in any of the 6 types, you will have a particular type of body. This body is an appropriated aggregate. So since it is appropriated aggregates, it is the source of all suffering, and it will be the source of all future suffering. And until we abandon all the karma and affliction due to which we appropriate these aggregates, for that long, we will not go beyond having these experiences of suffering. So we say that as humans, with the appropriated aggregates that we have, we experience the different types of suffering, such as the birth, aging, sickness, death, and so forth. But also, on the basis of these aggregates, whilst we are alive, due to our attachment and hatred and so forth that we generate a lot of afflictions, right? So on the basis of these appropriated aggregates, we generate afflictions, and therefore we create the causes to take another set of appropriated aggregates that again do not go beyond the nature of suffering. And therefore, we experience the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. And all of this is due to the nature of appropriated aggregates. Actually, these appropriated aggregates are exactly in the nature of pervasive compounded suffering. And we cannot be free from that suffering for as long as we have the nature of this type of aggregates. The great Geshe Pothawa said that the nature of the appropriated aggregates is to experience old age, sickness, and death. Just in the same way, it says the aggregates are inseparable from old age, sickness, and death, just in the way that heat and fire are inseparable. So if you look at the definition of the fire, we say that fire is that which is hot and burning. We cannot differentiate the two. If you have fire, you don't go beyond the nature of heat. It is the nature of heat. So what he's saying is that if you have a set of appropriated aggregates, it is within the nature of those aggregates to experience old age, sickness, death. You will experience all this type of suffering. You will not transcend suffering. Therefore, he says, you should not be surprised. You should not be upset. You should not think that this suffering came out of the blue, came unexpectedly. It is not like this. It is part of the deal. It's part of the package. You have this type of body, you will experience these types of suffering. And if you want to get beyond this, if you want to be free of this suffering, it means you have to stop taking this type of body. You have to stop producing these type of aggregates that are appropriated, are taken under the power of karma and afflictions. So if you don't like the suffering that comes with this, you have to abandon the appropriation, the taking of the body. And the main cause of this appropriation is afflictions. So if you don't want to have this type of body that comes with this type of suffering, you have to abandon afflictions. That's at the bottom of it. Okay, so we go back into the easy path. We're on page 18 on the fourth line from the top of the page. In brief, so as you can see here, he's summarizing suffering. So in brief, the appropriated aggregates are the basis of birth, old age, illness, and death in this life. So since you have established this type of appropriated aggregates, this type of body, these aggregates are the basis, are the foundation for experiencing these types of suffering in this life. So definitely you will experience birth, old age, illness, and death in this life. Not only that, they induce the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change in this life as well as in future lives. So this is not the only type of suffering that you will experience in this life, but also in future lives. On the basis of the aggregates that you have right now, you will experience the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. Moreover, from the moment the appropriated aggregates come into existence, they exist in the nature of the pervasive suffering of conditioning, the state of being dominated by karma and afflicted emotions. So there's important information here because it says that those appropriated aggregates are in that nature of suffering from the very moment they were established. It is not the case that first you establish those appropriated aggregates and sometime later, along the course of things, they became in the nature of suffering. It's not like that. They were like that, established like that from the beginning. So as you can see here, we are in this section of trying to generate the mind that is yearning for liberation. And to do this, we have to introduce suffering. We have to explain that appropriated aggregates themselves are in the nature of suffering. Once you understand this, you will want to be liberated. So, as we say, what we do here is we contemplate the general and the specific suffering of samsara, and in particular, we come to see how these appropriated aggregates are in the nature of suffering. The reason we do that is because we want to generate the wish or the aspiration to be free from samsara. So it is very important that we meditate on this subject and never be satisfied that we have enough familiarity with this. So we have to contemplate suffering from many different angles and perspectives. We have to do it for a very long time and continue to do it until we generate this sense of being disgusted, totally disappointed, disenchanted with samsara. And when we generate that genuine feeling of aversion for samsara, we can say that we have renunciation. We have to consider that we have been wandering within samsara since beginningless time. And unless now, this time, we make the effort and we do something to change this situation, if we don't change it, we will continue again endlessly in the future to go around and around, wandering in samsara, taking one set of aggregates after the other. So, you know, with some things that you buy in the shop, they have an expiry day, right? Whether you use it or not, there comes a point where, you know, it falls apart. It is not like this with samsara. Samsara does not have an expiry day. Unless we make the effort now to put an end to that, it will not naturally fall apart or come into an end, right? So we will still have to experience future suffering. So considering all that future suffering that awaits if we don't do something, we will generate intense fear for what is ahead of us. And this should not be just mere words. This is a feeling that should come deep down from the depth of your heart, from the depth of your own mind. Come to the point where you say, you know, I'm tired, I'm fed up, I don't want to have anything else to do with this samsaric existence. So if we're looking at what is the measure of having generated uncontrived, genuine renunciation, is when you cannot tolerate the thought that you will have to remain in samsara even for one instance. So they give the example here and they say, imagine that you are in a house and the house is on fire. And through the windows of the house, the wind comes in and flares and intensifies that fire, right? So if you are in a situation like this, all you're thinking is, how can I escape this house that is on fire? Even I don't want to stay here 1 minute longer. Like, what's the quickest way out? So once you have generated that sense of urgency and total disenchantment with samsara, you cannot tolerate it even for 1 more minute, then you can say that you have generated this genuine renunciation. Genuine renunciation is extremely important because it is the indispensable basis and foundation of any practice that we do, whether it is sutra and tantra. And in order to generate that indispensable and uncontrived renunciation, we have to contemplate this general and specific suffering again and again. So the advice is, please engage this topic, examine it from every perspective and for a long time. We stop here for today, and this completes the first section, generating the mind intent on liberation. And then what we have next week is ascertaining the nature of the path of liberation.